Hello and welcome to video 4 of 2402 lecture on blood vessels. We'll cover blood pressure and blood pressure regulation. So blood pressure goes downhill, like I said, from your ventricle and aorta over here all the way down through your arterioles, capillaries, venules, veins, vena cava back to the right atrium, and where it gets pumped up again in the ventricles and goes back out. Now this is the left side, okay, so this is the left atrium and down back to the, basically back to the right, left ventricle and aorta all the way back down to the right atrium, as you know the blood flow. So systolic pressure is the high pressure. This is the big number in your blood pressure measurement. Diastolic pressure is the low pressure, or the bottom number in your blood pressure measurement. So a good number is 120/80. That's during ventricular contraction is systole, and during ventricular relaxation is diastole. Pulse pressure is the strength of your pulse. So how different your systolic from your diastolic is. And it starts out really strong, right? Like if you're 120/80, 120 minus 80 is 40. So you have a pulse pressure of 40 millimeters of mercury. It's a difference between the two. Now that pulse pressure is going to go down because, as you can see, these numbers get closer together. So here in the arterioles, it might be, what do we got here? 90/75. So we're down to 15, roughly, right? Pulse pressure. And it gets smaller and smaller until eventually it becomes effectively nothing. Your pulse is the palpable, and palpable means feelable, so you can feel the difference between those two pressures. Now, mean arterial pressure, or MAP, is not right in the middle, right? You might think if it's 120 on systolic and 80 on diastolic, the mean would be 100. But as you can see, it's a little bit low. And the reason is that diastole lasts longer. So the contraction, if you think about your heart beating, it's like a quick beat and then a slow relax. Quick beat, slow relax. So diastolic pressure lasts longer, therefore the average is weighted a little bit towards the diastolic pressure. So in this case, you want to find your mean arterial pulse. You take the diastolic pressure plus the pulse pressure divided by 3. Okay, that's a good rough estimate of your mean arterial pressure. So in your aorta, 80 plus 40 divided by 3 is 80 plus 13.333, so 93.333, not written here. And this mean arterial pressure can get way down low at the end, obviously, but by the time it gets into capillaries, it's somewhere around 35 millimeters. From capillaries down to the end of the capillaries, it goes from 35 down to 17. And then from the veins down back to the vena cava, it goes from 15 to 0. You might say, where did those other two go? How come it goes from 17 to 15? Well, there's a big drop off right at the end of the capillaries where, not really shown here, but the capillary beds turn into like these larger veins and the blood pressure drops fairly significantly, a couple of points there. These are all mean arterial pressures. Highest up here is around 93 in the aorta, and continuing downwards, dramatically going down through the arterioles, as you can see. If you want to go back to slide 6 to see how the veins move the blood back up, that's in this section of the book, but I didn't want to put it twice. So muscular pump, respiratory pump, and sympathetic vasoconstriction. How do you regulate it? Well, blood pressure, BP or P, varies directly with cardiac output, resistance, and blood volume. So if your heart puts out more blood, pressure goes up. If the blood becomes more resistant to flow, pressure goes up. If you get more blood, right, you're retaining fluids, and volume goes up, pressure goes up. So all three of those guys cause pressure to go straight up. Let's talk about some short-term ways that we can regulate it. Neural controls are, your nervous system. There are some regions in your brain called the vasomotor center and cardiovascular centers, and they're in the medulla, which is that sort of brain stemmy area, that will enable your blood vessels to constrict. So at rest, just sitting around listening to this me blather, your cardiovascular system exhibits what's called a vasomotor tone, which is just kind of your baseline, moderate constriction. If you get nervous by sympathetic input, so if you get stressed or scared or angry, you can almost feel your blood pressure go up. You ever been so angry you can almost feel, pulsing in your head? Well, that's because sympathetic input has caused vasoconstriction. Vasoconstriction increases resistance, which increases blood pressure. So there's some little summaries. You are up here. There's some summaries. Short term, because this is, on and off. Same thing with these baroreceptors. Now, baro means pressure, so pressure receptors that you find in your carotid artery and your brachiocephalic trunk and lots of these large arteries in your thorax and neck. So when pressure goes up, they're going to send signals that are going to try to reduce it. If pressure goes down, they're going to send signals to try to increase it. So if you've ever stood up really fast from laying down and gotten dizzy, it's because these guys are trying to catch up with the rapid change in blood pressure due to that immediate stand-up. It's not really good for down-regulating high blood pressure. If you've got hypertension, you don't just fix it, or else if you could, over the long period, you wouldn't have hypertension anymore, right? So it's not so great at long-term fixes, just short-term. All these are. Chemoreceptors likewise can respond to certain chemicals. If you've got low pH, which means you've got a lot of CO2, or if you've got low oxygen levels, which means you need to breathe some more, right? So you're going to want to vasoconstrict, which will elevate the pressure, and increase cardiac output, which should pump out more blood to the lungs, getting you to vent more CO2 and take in more oxygen, if it's working correctly. So still short-term regulation, hormonal controls. We did neural, chemical, and now hormonal. Wait, was that right? Just neural, and now hormonal. Epinephrine and norepinephrine, you know this from your endocrine system. They're released by your adrenal medulla, but they also can be caused to be released by input from your nervous system. Whatever, they are hormones, so they count as hormonal controls. You just know what they do over here. Angiotensin 2, which we'll talk about more later, maybe even in the next slide, I don't know, is generated in a sequence which I'll describe, but it does cause vasoconstriction. It also stimulates aldosterone and ADH release, which, as you hopefully remember, cause you to retain fluids. So if you retain fluids and vasoconstrict, blood pressure is going to go up. Pretty straightforward, I hope. Atrial natriuretic peptide, the one that's released by the heart, is really kind of the antagonist here. It's going to reduce blood volume. So this ANP causes you to pee, lowering blood pressure. Epinephrine, angiotensin 2, ADH, aldosterone all do the opposite. These guys are going to raise blood pressure. And there we see kind of a recap of the endocrine system in this table is kind of useful as a summary. Last slide for this screencast is long-term regulation. So generally, renal mechanisms are responsible for long-term regulation. Renal, kidneys, blood volume is connected. Your urine is produced from your blood. So if you want to reduce blood volume, you have to produce urine to get rid of some of that volume. The direct renal mechanism just involves a simple relationship between pressure and urine volume. If you pump a bunch of high pressure blood into the kidneys, more of it's going to leak out into the urine and you lose more fluid. If you have real low pressure to the kidneys, they're just naturally not going to lose as much liquid. So that's very direct, hopefully very easy. The indirect renal mechanism is a bit more complicated, and here's that renin, angiotensin, aldosterone mechanism. But I put it in a nice little sequence. So hopefully it makes sense. If blood pressure in the kidneys is low, so just like this over here, low, right? If it's low, the kidneys are going to say, oh no, we need to release this chemical renin. Why? Well, because renin causes a plasma protein called angiotensin 1. Yeah, I know it's got a 1 to it. But this is a normal plasma protein produced by your liver that's out there right now in your blood. When exposed to renin, it becomes angiotensin 2, so the active form. And angiotensin 2, as we saw in the previous slide, there's angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 does these things. Stimulates the release of aldosterone, which you know what aldosterone does, retains water and salt. Stimulates the release of ADH, which we know what ADH does, retains water. Makes you thirsty. When you're thirsty, you drink water. When you drink water, it goes into your bloodstream, raising blood volume. causes vasoconstriction, which the blood vessels constrict. There's less room for the given amount of blood, so the pressure goes up, as you can see. All of these are methods to raise blood pressure and blood volume, or blood volume. Now, you think with all of the problems we have with high blood pressure in our, in our lives, that you might not want to be able to raise blood pressure. But this is a lifesaver, right? If you're losing blood or you're seriously dehydrated, you're going to need to stay awake and upright long enough to get to water or get to a doctor or whatever. So these are good mechanisms to keep that pressure up. And in absence, and I should say in the opposite direction, if blood pressure in the kidneys is high, well, forget all this. You don't do any because it's only triggered by low. And that is video 4.